Hey everybody, welcome to the Premier Life Podcast. This is Dr. Nate coming to you live from Anchorage, Alaska, and I can't wait to share with you guys what I have for you today. And so today we're actually be talking about dopamine and the frontal lobes and really how technology is waging a war on your central nervous system. And so I want to give you guys the cutting edge on how you're going to stay healthy for the rest of your life when it comes to interacting with technology and keeping a healthy central nervous system. And so, have you ever played a game, like maybe it was in Las Vegas and you're at the blackjack table and you were just dealt a hand and you're like, man, this is going to be the one. Maybe it's the next one. I'm going to take home that jackpot. Or, maybe you were eating some food and you said, man, this is so good. Like, I really want some more of this stuff. That is actually dopamine working on your central nervous system. And so, dopamine is a neuromodulator that is in control of the reward tracks in your brain that tell you, hey, we should do some more of this stuff. In God's design, this is really, used to promote health promoting behaviors, right? And so eating, moving, those are all things that are, going to be rewarded in your central nervous system that say, hey, I should do some more of this stuff. However, with modern technology, corporations have found ways to hijack that system to move it away from health promoting behaviors to degenerative behaviors, right? And that's exactly why casinos are so successful, is because they have leveraged that technology of moving that reward track from health promoting behaviors like movement, exercise, relationships towards, technology, towards different things that are taking yourself away from healthy habits and more into health degenerative habits like, processed junk food, video games and things of that sort. And so really, I want to share with you guys how you're going to experience that radical healing and how you're going to stay healthy and safe for the rest of your life. And so, really, when we talk about the frontal lobe, what is the frontal lobe even used for, right? You may have heard of it before, like, you may have heard of that mad science, back in psychiatry, back in the 1900s when they used to do frontal lobotomies. And, so frontal lobes are really in control of executive function, right? And so that's when you decide, like, hey, I'm going to move towards this. I'm going to move towards that. I'm going to flick my eyes towards this way. I'm going to move my eyes towards that way. It's executive control of voluntary functions. And other things that it's in control of is attention. So, for people that have, poor functioning frontal lobes, I'm going to kind of get into this a little bit, but if you have trouble sitting in one space and, focusing and actually reading a book, through a chapter, and, you're that person that's like, oh my gosh, squirrel, or like a fly on the wall, like, oh my gosh, it's taking my attention away. Think of how many people that have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or ADHD, right? I mean, so many kids are experiencing these issues, right? And I think that Ritalin is one of the most commonly prescribed drugs for teenagers and adolescents. And so really, this is a huge problem for kids. And I want to bring this up because this is so important, is that kids are the most vulnerable population. You may have heard that frontal lobes are not fully developed until somebody is 25 years old. And that's because the myelin sheaths, or the nerves that have this insulation covering around the nerves, they're not fully myelinated in the frontal lobe until about 25 years old. So what does that even mean, right? And it means that the nerves in kids' frontal lobes are not fully protected until they're about 25 years old. Now, even with the myelin sheaths and even with protection, that there is still a lot of degradation and still a lot of degeneration with those technological uses. And so, again, I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to, really handle that well. And so you may have seen like these different marketing, ads where somebody has like a pennant or some sort of gemstone and they're like, wear this and it'll protect you from all EMFs that are coming in towards, your body. And guys, I'm sorry to say that those are actually not doing necessarily what they claim to do. And so the only way that you can make sure that you are staying healthy is giving yourselves, hours of break from these technological uses. And it comes from something called the inverse square law. And so what that law essentially states is that to stay protected, you have to have distance between it. So the further you are away from an object, the less effect it's going to have on you, right? Now, there's other things you could do as well, like you could do a night shift, red light shift mode on your phones. If you aren't aware of that, it's an easy Google search, how to do that. You can also use airplane mode, right? That every time that you use a cell phone or a 5G hotspot, that's going to be your phone is going to be reaching out to the satellites, every millisecond to stay connected with that tower. And so the more that your cell phone, uses that signal, even when you're not on the phone, right? If it's constantly communicating with that, it's going to increase the radiation that your phone is using, right? So if you stay in airplane mode, you use the red light shift. Those are things that are naturally protective, especially when you're using technology late at night. The reason why this all is a huge issue really is because, when your frontal lobe is being affected and your dopamine levels are being affected, initially there's a spike in dopamine, right? Where you guys see these dopamine hits. Now, if you chronically have these high dopamine hits, what actually happens is your dopamine levels will decrease. They'll become depleted, they'll become exhausted. When you're dopamine exhausted, you are essentially putting yourself into a state of lack of attention focus. You're putting yourself into a state of lack of energy. You're just putting yourself into a state of lack of motivation, and you're going to have increased suggestibility. And honestly, this is all a perfect scenario for somebody that's going to be in the casinos, right? Because if you're not having that focus, you're not having that attention, you're not having that motivation, you're having an increased suggestibility, you're going to be likely to put more money on the table, right? And so this is why they pour you free drinks. This is why they cut you out from sunlight. This is why they pump the air full of, oxygen to make sure that you're staying connected with the device that's in front of you inside the casino. Ironically, that patented technology was actually bought by Google and Facebook, and they actually integrated that technology into every social media app. And so that's why social media is so addictive, and that's why it's actually so connected to teenage depression. It's why it's so connected with teenage suicidality. And that's because with those drastically dropped dopamine levels, that causes depression, that causes so many further issues that are, largely affecting your whole body, right? And so again, this is such a huge fully in scoping area. And so I'm going to give you guys some brief tactics on how to mitigate that. Again, so we talked about the red light shift. We talked about, mitigating the night, light at night. And we're going to talk about a few other things here. And so here are some other things in your lifestyle that are going to be depleting your dopamine that are, going to be obviously tied into this, that aren't necessarily technological, but, if you focus on these areas, it's going to best help your chances of maintaining healthy frontal lobes and really succeeding in your health goals. And so, number one, focus on disruption and the sleep-wake cycles. So if you're the person that has a completely inverted circadian rhythm where you're largely awake at night and you're sleeping throughout the day, that's going to really, mess up a lot of your hormones. It's going to mess up a lot of your autophagy and apoptosis, which are your cell recycling programs inside your body. If that's happening on a chronic daily basis, that's going to increase your likelihood for neurodegenerative diseases. It's going to increase your chances of, ADHD, cancer. It just came out actually that, inverted circadian rhythms, especially for night shift workers, it came out as a class 2A carcinogen. And so for people that are chronically under, light at night and being asleep during the day, it becomes a huge problem for their health down the road. Number two, toxic exposure to chemicals in the food, air, and water. And so specifically, I want to point one out that's really going to be a large problem for your frontal lobe is fluoride. And so fluoride is used extensively through public health safety measures in public water supply. And so if you're living in a city and you're not having well water out of your own well, right, the city and the government actually supplement fluoride into your water for dental health. Now, the problem with this is that fluoride is not a naturally occurring mineral inside your dental cavities, right? Or it's not something that's naturally found in your teeth. And so for it to be replacing the calcium hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that is in your teeth naturally, it actually makes a weaker, it's like patching a hole in your wall with cardboard, right? It doesn't make sense. It's not something that's naturally going to be in your wall. Yeah, it is going to close up the hole, but it's not going to be what's naturally supposed to be there, right? So, but the bigger problem with that is that fluoride is a huge toxin towards your mitochondria. Mitochondria are, these energy producing organelles or mini organs inside your cells that are these massive, like, energy producers. They're processors. They're like, the control panel of your cells. And so when you have fluoride causing damage in those, it's going to create damage to your energy. It's going to create damage to your central nervous system, because in humans, mitochondria are most dense in your nervous system and in your heart. And so when you have those issues, again, there was actually a Harvard study that came out and said that fluoride caused an IQ decrease in children when they had it supplemented into their water supply. The other sources of this are actually in, again, dental facilities. When they're doing a teeth cleaning, they're using fluoride treatments. And also, they're also used extensively in antidepressants and neuropsychiatric drugs. And so that's, again, why you see a lot of these frontal lobe depressions in people that are chronically on SSRIs and other antidepressant and neuropsychiatric medications. And so stay away from fluoride as much as you can. Again, this is not advice to drop completely cold turkey off of your antidepressants, but maybe this can spark a great conversation with the people that prescribe that to you. So other things that can be tied with these frontal lobes, again, is exactly, focusing on health promoting activities, which are things like focusing on deficiencies in key nutrients like creatine, B vitamins, CoQ10, vitamin E. Those are really great places to start when you're focusing on your frontal lobes. Another big problem with the frontal lobes is also that we live a very sedentary indoor lifestyle. And when we are indoors and we're chronically in front of computer screens, guys, what makes these things so addictive is a combination of blue light toxicity, which is exclusively spiked in technology, and flicker rates. And so flicker is when you see, like, maybe you've seen a light before and it shifts that on and off flutter, right? Now, for every single light that you're under, unless it's specifically flicker free, most LEDs nowadays, they have a very high rate of flicker, which your eyes can't sense, but your brain can sense. And so there's research that shows that flickering can cause migraines, it can cause anxiety, panic attacks. These things are devastating to your central nervous system. And so when you have that combination of blue light and flickering, that causes your brain to want to focus on what's causing that issue. And so when you have to have that constant focus, you're using up that dopamine store, and you're causing that dopamine to become exhausted to where you're constantly becoming, have that super short attention span, your energy is depleted, you have decreased motivation, and you have increased suggestibility, right? And so when that becomes a constant issue, that's becoming a really big problem for people that are chronic on technology and using that constantly with their jobs or with their, when you're at home. Last thing is something called, a subluxation. And so subluxation is the chiropractic term of what we're exactly adjusting you when you lay down on a chiropractic table. And so when you do have those issues in your central nervous system, that's affecting your frontal lobes. In fact, one of the very, prominent researchers, her name's Heidi Havoc. She's in New Zealand. She's a chiropractor, but she also has a doctorate in neurophysiology. And what she found was that when you get a chiropractic adjustment, the main area that it focuses on is actually in your frontal lobe. And so that's such an amazing news for people, especially in this day and age. And that's why you hear such success stories with, people that have ADHD that are much better able to focus, or people that have chronic anxiety and their frontal lobes are working better to where they're able to tamp down and dampen that anxiety signal from your brain. And so this is something that's really great news for us, as we begin to take care of the nervous system, how the body's able to heal itself, how everybody was designed for radical health and radical healing. Well, thank you guys so much for the episode today. I hope that you took, some notes. I hope you took some things away from it, and I hope that this helps you have a good foot forward on your next, health goal and your next step towards the life that you want to live. Guys, thank you so much for listening today. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll get back to you next week.